Yeah, it's great to be here. I had quite a journey getting here. For those that didn't hear, but I got in this morning at 5, and then my luggage didn't. So I'm here. But I'd love to come to India. I've been coming here since the 90s, and so I think the energy here. I can feel it when you talk about quantum energy. There's something about the energy, the spiritual energy that's in India, and I hope to take some of that back home with me when I come. So. Yeah, when in my past life, if you will, before I got into this, my dad was a Silva instructor, which was a meditation teacher, and we used machines. So when somebody says, how come we have machines doing meditation? My dad taught a course, and we used galvanic skin response systems where you put your fingers on a device and it would make a beeping sound. You could set it for alpha, which I'm going to talk about. And once you get to alpha, it would shut off. So you could use it for sports or for learning, different things like that. And then, of course, after learning that about meditation, I was tricked into it for sports. And then when I got older and started realizing that meditation can be used for other things and for my own spiritual understanding, that's where it came from. So I'm going to kind of delve into that and what it's about. I typically tell people, I have a quote that I use. I actually got it from Sai Baba. He says, service to humanity is service to divinity. So when you think about that, I believe that whoever's here is supposed to be here, and whoever isn't, they lose out or whatever. They could have been here, but each of you has 1,000 or 2,000 people that you're going to go back and touch. And that's what it's about. So when we make a change within ourselves, when Rita was talking about our cellular system and our genetics and DNA, they now know that we change up to 7 generations, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. When you change yourself, you change 7 generations forwards and backwards in your genetic line, in your heredity. So you're not just changing yourself here today, you're changing other people. And we don't have a clicker, so I'm trying to figure out how to get this to work. There we go. So I want to talk, first of all, the big reason that what I have is needed in the world is something called stress. Now, probably none of you here has experienced stress, right? Everybody experiences stress. We all have this fight or flight. In fact, what's amazing to me, when I go back home and I'm talking, we have about 1,800 doctors in America that use our Braintap, and I'm communicating with some of them each week. And they go, you go to India and you're teaching about meditation? I go, well, they don't really need to be taught how to meditate most of the time. But I said, the thing is that what's happened here in India, the sad part is that a lot of Indians want to become Americans. And it's so, and that's kind of sad to me. But the Americans should have taken some of what you brought to the world as far as meditation and spirituality. That's really what we need to kind of marry that. And I believe too that for those that don't know, we have series about money because a lot of people misunderstand money. Money's just energy. And for me, it's never been a problem. So some people always ask me, how do you do this quantum energy stuff and make money? Well, you make money because you help people. Focus on the people and the money comes. That's where if you focus on the money, the people won't come. so you need to, that's kind of that's one of my keys. So stress is there. So a lot of the stress that we have, we put it on ourselves, right? Some people can handle a lot of stress, some people can't. But the reality is most people in the world, about 97% of the people, know that stress is causing them to have problems. It's causing them health problems, mental problems, all these things. They say that 97% of all illness is exacerbated by stress. So when you think about it, if we can remove stress, then a lot of the other issues would go away. Now, why is that happening? When you're under stress in this fight or flight, let's say you're taking the world's greatest minerals and vitamins, your body doesn't get to digest them because all the blood is circulating to the hands and arms because it thinks you're being chased by a tiger. It doesn't know that that's why when we pray before we eat, literally we're praying for ourselves, because when our body's relaxed and we're in that what they call parasympathetic state, we can digest, metabolize, and use the nutrients that we're getting. So part of this is getting into the right state at the right time. So there's a book out there. If you've never read this book, it's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And if you ever watch on YouTube, there's some good things on there, but don't get sucked in and watch it all day. But when you get onto YouTube, put in Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and the guy who wrote this book, Robert Sapolsky, it's a really good story. But let me just tell you this: when a zebra's out there in the Serengeti, when they wake up in the morning, they are praying that they are not the slowest zebra. They're praying that they're the second slowest. Because the slowest zebra becomes dinner that night, right? The second slowest at least gets to live another day. But the way the book's written is, When a zebra gets chased by a lion can run for maybe 4 minutes. Then it says, hey, this is too much work. I'm going back under the shade. I'll just hang out till I find a slow zebra come by, and I'll eat that. But when that lion leaves, the zebra literally forgets all about the lion. Puts its head down, starts eating grass, doesn't go to meetings, doesn't call its family members, doesn't, say, hey, I was chased by a lion today, and, doesn't get badges because it made it 3 weeks without being chased by a lion. This is what people do, right? We carry our own baggage with us, our own baggage for stress. So when I talk about stress, situations cause stress. I mean, the way that we think about it, situations don't cause stress. It's our reaction to those situations. In America, and they have them here too, I'm sure, but they have something called a Black Hawk helicopter. Does anybody here fly helicopters? Okay. I said this once in America, and there was a Black Hawk helicopter pilot in the room, and I said it wrong, so they corrected me. Imagine that you are just recruited. You're being told you have to fly a Black Hawk helicopter. Well, first thing you have to do is you have to steer with your right foot, the right side of the bird, the left foot with the left side of the bird. So your feet are doing two different things. That alone would maybe stress out a lot of people. But then your hands are guiding another set of wings and aiming your munitions on both sides. So both hands are doing separate things. Your right ear is listening to your crew. Your left ear is listening to the tower. Your right eye has a heads-up display that you're reading, and your other eye is looking out into where you're flying. All that's happening at one time. That's a lot of stress, right? And then somebody starts shooting at them. Right? Well, they don't just put people into that stress, right? They actually probably find that only about what they say is about 1 out of 100 that want to fly that Black Hawk helicopter make it because they can't handle it. They don't have the capacity. The problem most people have is they have not built the capacity to handle the stress that they're under nowadays. And that's what we're talking about. When we talk about neuroplasticity, that's really what we're talking about. So we can't change the stressful events, but what we can do is we can change our reactions to those stressful events. We don't have to be stressed. In fact, that military pilot, they don't feel stress. What happens when somebody has PTSD? Everybody knows what that is, has heard of that before? We just did a study in Kansas State University, which is a university in America, with PTSD. And what we found was when a military personnel gets post-traumatic stress, this can happen to anybody. It doesn't have to be military, but for the military, what happens is they start operating at this high level of stress, like that pilot I was talking about. But let's say that they're in Iran or Iraq or wherever, or they're in Afghanistan. It doesn't really matter. And you're operating at this high level of stress all the time. Then you come home. That stress is not there anymore. Well, they don't feel right. The person who was under all that stress doesn't feel right. So what they do is they start creating stress in their environment. They start causing fights. They start doing things because they want to get the environment around them to be stressful so they feel normal. Do you understand? So part of that is, then that's why they need help. They need help changing their brain. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, why that's so. So we talk about our fast-paced lifestyle. How many people in here have cell phones? Okay. All right. How many people text message? Okay. When you get when you send a text message, how quickly do you want a response? Right, instantly, right? They shouldn't be doing anything else. As soon as you send a text, stop everything, send me a text back. If they don't, you might even send it again. If you have kids like I do and grandkids, my grandkids don't text me yet. They're pretty small. But my kids, when they text me, they're like, what's wrong? I'm going, well, I do have a life besides sending you texts back all the time. But they think, they might even pick up the phone, maybe, if I don't answer their text after a while. That's the way people are communicating now. But what happens, the reason that's become such a fad is when we do that, we get a dopamine hit. Dopamine happens in the frontal lobe. So when we get that hit, that's why we have all the addictions we have on the planet. Pretty much they're dopamine-rich addictions. So they're looking for that next hit. Now, the reason that people get mad or angry if you don't return that text is their brain's waiting for that reward. And you don't give it to them, they're mad. They'll send it again. So they want to get that hit back and get that response. So when we think about this, these are all the things that happens to the body when you're under stress. The brain, you have stress hormones that happen. In fact, I wrote an article once that was published in quite a few magazines. It was why chocolate is more fattening. Why stress is more fattening than chocolate. So in America, the overweight epidemic that's happening there, the guilt over eating the chocolate is more fattening than eating the chocolate. You should just give it up and eat it, not have a problem with no attachment, right? That's what they say. Then you probably wouldn't have gained weight with it. But the stress about it, when you think about the thyroid, the heart, the immune system, it creates body fat. When you say to yourself, I've heard people say this, they say, all I have to do is walk by the desserts and I gain weight. Your mind is so incredibly powerful. It's a 100 billion neural bit processor, your brain is. So when you do that, it slows down your metabolism. It creates the cortisol, which creates cortisol is a fat storage hormone. It tells your body at that moment, start storing fat. You know, what you need to do is turn on glucagon, which tells your body to burn fat, but that's not what you're telling it. So the brain listens to that message, instructs the chemical program, and then it runs the program. Because the reality is not what's out here. I hope you all know that you're not really seeing what's out here. None of you actually have seen reality. We only render we actually see about 20% of reality. We render 80%, which means our brain fabricates everything else. This has never happened to you if you haven't been married. Okay, if you've ever said you're in the kitchen, you say, hey, where's the salt shaker? And your spouse says, it's right there on the counter. No, it isn't. You're looking right there on the counter. It's not there. But as soon as she walks in or he walks in, they reach over and they grab the salt shaker. Here it is right here. It could be anything. It could be a tool. It could be a box of something. They go, it's right there. It wasn't there a minute ago. And the reality, it wasn't there a minute ago because you didn't render it. If I walked out to the kitchen and said, I don't know where the salt shaker is, it could be sitting right there, but my brain is never going to make me a liar. It's going to fabricate and create this reality the way that it is, not reality itself. We've never seen reality. We've only seen the rendering of reality, not the reality itself. So that's where the stress comes in. It's our response to it. So what happens is everybody has all this uptime and no downtime, and that's really what we want to talk about here with all the different technologies we're talking about. I'm not going to go over this whole thing, but what our doctors do is they look at this. If somebody comes in and they're under-aroused, now your nervous system's, it's okay to be over-aroused, get excited. It's okay to be depressed. And I like to say what Paramahansa Yogananda said we should be more like babies. When a baby gets mad, they get angry, they get upset, they get over it. Right? When an adult gets angry or mad or upset, they take you off their Christmas list. They never call you anymore. They don't invite you to events. They don't get over it, right? So what happens is the nervous system gets locked in it. Most people in the world right now are locked in an over-aroused state, which means one more thing happens, they blow up. It's not a bunch of little things. Because even though that one little thing, they go, it's only that thing. It's not that one thing. It's that you've never cleared out the system. Think of your body like a capacitor. And my first schooling actually was in electronics. So that's when somebody says, why do you have electronics and you do psychology? And I'm going, well, because I really wanted to do electronics, but my dad was a seminar leader and had me teaching with him. And I found out that was more fun than making electronic stuff. So but a capacitor, what it does in a circuit is it holds a charge. And then at a certain point, it discharges. Your bodies are like that. You go through the day, you have a charge. If you never discharge it, and there's a lot of things we could go into real detail about that, why you want to ground and all those things, but your body needs to discharge, and that's what meditation does, right? If people are meditating and knowing how to do that. But if you have an under-aroused nervous system and you start meditating, that's really bad. Now you don't want to do anything. There's an expression in America, it says, you're so heavenly proud, you're no earthly good. So the reality is that when somebody says, I'm trying to be spiritual, you can't be spiritual. You are spirit. You're trying to be physical. That's the problem. The problem isn't you're trying to be spiritual. You can't be more than what you are. That's 100% of what you are. So the reality is when somebody's underperforming, their body's underperforming, they have problems like poor attention, impulse, easily distracted, disorganized, depressed. Think of depression as compression. What compression means is you know the solution's inside your head, but you don't like the solution, so you're not going to bring it out. So you're in there in your head doing your thing, and you don't want to, so you get depressed, compressed. We want to be more expansive. When somebody's unstable, you can be over-aroused, you can be under-aroused, but if you're unstable, you get migraines, headaches, seizures, sleepwalking, hot flashes, PMS. All these things can be dealt with. These are not reality. These are symptoms. Reality is that we should be able to be extremely happy. We should be able to be extremely sad. They say that if you came out with the world's best novel today, and you didn't have all the things, all the part of the story, like there's the good times and the bad times, you wouldn't become a number one bestseller. Nobody would read it. They've actually nailed it down to everyone's lives. In every book, there's only 128 different stories, and you're writing one of them for yourself right now. Everybody and if that story isn't being, so that means like in your story you could be the victim, or in your story you could be the victor. So what you want to be is that sometimes we will be the victor, and sometimes we'll feel like we're the victim. That's okay. Don't get stuck in any of them. You got to keep moving on. And then if you have an exhausted nervous system, which is what I see all the time, when people get to me, or if you're the doctor out there, they get to you because their nervous system isn't performing. When we're kids and you have all this energy and you're going, you get wound up and you can't go to sleep, but then you pass out. Most adults can't do that anymore. They get wound up, and they don't know how to shut it off. And I'm going to get into that a little bit. Maybe today, it might be tomorrow when I do my other talk about why that is. Now we talk about influencers. So there's an innate consciousness. Consciousness is the underlying reality of all things. So when you think about this reality and who you are and what's going on, there's forces beyond your control that are controlling you because it's you, but it's you in a different form, let's say. It's just like ice can be a boiling water, or it can be running water, or it can be an ice cube. So then we have an innate neurological response. So our bodies are pre-programmed. When you're born, you actually got whatever your mom and dad were up to that moment. Everything they knew was transmitted to you. Everything their mom and dad knew was transmitted to you. Everything their mom and dad knew was transmitted back to the very beginning of time. You have all that information in you. They're now showing this is true, and you can affect 7 generations back. You didn't learn a language. How many people in here can speak 2 languages? Most of you probably, right? Because you speak English and you speak whatever your native tongue is. That means that you have a brain circuit going in your head that most people don't. If you know how to speak 2 languages, your brain keeps a circuit going to learn languages. When you learn that first language, you absorb that language. You didn't learn it the way they teach us in school. You literally absorb the language. In theta, when you're that young, your brain literally absorbed like a sponge everything that was going around you. Then you started sorting it out. When my grandson started talking at really young age, because he has an older sister, and he talks more than she does, and it's like that's because his mirror neurons were going, and he had more alpha probably going. I'm going to get into that in a moment. So his mirror neurons that's how we learn. We learn from our mom and dad and from our peers. Because that's where our brain's designed, and it turns on and off genes. We can turn on and off 2,300 genes with just a thought. And they've already proved this. So things like that happen all the time. So we have this biochemical, mechanical changes that happen. That's why, unless you're Saint Germain or one of these saints and gurus that I've heard about, or Babaji or something, you can't just eat whatever you want. That intelligence, everything in the universe has an intelligence. It has consciousness. It has a neurological response. When you put that into your body, that's why when I'm working with an addictive, somebody who's had a T-shirt and it said, you have to excuse me for this. We need to get does everything need to be reset? Yeah. When my brother, he liked to drink a little bit of alcohol, and we got him a T-shirt that said "Instant Asshole," just add alcohol, because he changed his personality so much. People are like that. I think this is coming up. I guess we wouldn't be speaking. And when I spoke at the pyramid one time, the whole lights went out there. That was kind of weird. There's no windows really, so we're all in the dark. Does anybody know how to do that? You didn't finish the biochemical. So what we're talking about here is when you adjust something into your body, it has an intelligence of its own. 95% of the time, you're being ran by your subconscious, which means you're not present. You're a passenger. So when you wonder what happens, and maybe when you're driving across town, although here you got to stay pretty present when you're driving your car. It's kind of crazy, but when you're doing certain activities during the day, you're not really there. Your body's done them so many times, so much. It's all habit and patterns. So when you put something into your body, it's going to take on its life of its own. That's why it's so important, like when you're talking about eating vegetarian and doing those kind of things, because there's a consciousness to everything. It's not just some things, it's everything. So as you're thinking about these biochemical and mechanical changes, our body, unfortunately, when we were born, we had millions of stem cells, right? Millions and millions of them. As we get better looking and more intelligent with age, isn't that what happens to us? What happens is we get less and less. When you're my age, unfortunately, they say now those stem cells that used to make 1 million of them are only making 200 of them. So what happens when I really get old? Because I plan on being around for a while, right? So we got to do something to keep that going. These are the mechanical changes we're talking about. The body, so let's think about this for a minute. This body, every generation is getting better because it's learning, it's developing, it's coping. The only reason that electromagnetic energy is influencing our body today is it all happened so quickly. Our bodies will adapt. They will adjust because these bodies are infinite. That's what they do. We'll morph into something, we'll be something. We won't be X-Men like it's on television maybe, not quite yet, but eventually maybe. You know, when avatars like Babaji and Baba, Sai Baba and those, they say, hey, I'm just like you, I just know who I am and you don't. That means there's the potential inside of every one of us. So, but if we don't do it, we have a mechanical, like our body's going to die so we can be reborn again and come back and try it again until we get it right. You know, over and over and over again, the cycle continues. When you talk about habit patterns, these are the patterns. Now we're getting into where like I work, unfortunately. This is kind of the realm. We're affecting the others, but the reality is people will come to me because they're in pain or because they have a pattern they want to change. Maybe they eat too much or they smoke too much or they drink or whatever the problem is. They know it's bad. A habit, in this case, a bad habit can be defined as something that you don't want to do, but you do it anyway, right? It takes no effort. So imagine if you could take the motivation you have in those habits and put it into something positive. You can. You just need to rewire. That's where neuroplasticity comes in. The circuitry's there. It's just like you can have a circuit that turns on a light, or you can put something else into that circuit and it can turn on whatever you want. Your brain can turn on whatever you want. It's just we're conditioned to believe it's supposed to do this thing. There are good habits and patterns too. The next is we have adaptive reduction, right? So our body's going to adapt, improvise, it's going to overcome, those kind of things. Now, our body for the longest time, we can get away with doing certain things when we're younger, because of those stem cells, because of the healing potential of our body, and because it knows that we're going to make a lot of mistakes, right? The old saying that it's too bad that youth is always wasted on the young, right? Because when we get older, we know, wow, if I could have done that again, I would have done this or that. But we get those experiences, but we have to be able to adapt and improvise, and our body's doing that all the time. Our body adapts to what's happening. We have what we call the conscious awareness that we have. We talk about the problem with conscious awareness. Remember, only 5% of the time are we conscious. And that's being generous. You know, some people out there, when you hear the expression that the masses are asleep, has everybody heard that before? Well, when we measure people on our HRV, which I'm going to go over tomorrow, we find that about almost 100% of the people that we measure on that are over 60% in delta while they're awake. That's not a good thing. That means there's high inflammation in the body. It means the body's rapidly aging. It means that they might have had brain trauma. But it's also telling me that the brain wants to go to sleep to reboot and heal. But they haven't been doing it. Because some people, even though they meditate, they're not meditating correctly. There's a science to it. So, and we'll get into that later. And then what happens is if all those systems are out of alignment, then you have system failure. And that's, of course, when we exit. We exit the body or we go get help. You know, it's going to keep cycling through that. The body is going to give us feedback. When you have pain in the body, for instance, pain never happens in the body. It's impossible. It only happens in the brain. But you experience it in the body. And then our body can have what's called phantom pain, right? I've worked with people that had no limbs but had pain in their feet or pain in their hands without a limb being there, because it's not the limb that's doing it, it's the brain that's doing it. So we have to change and adjust the brain in that part. So, of course, this is the way people used to meditate, and a lot of people meditate here, which is fine. The problem with this is if you meditate like this and you haven't been instructed to do it right, staying present in your frontal cortex, which means looking into your third eye, keeping awake. Meditation isn't sleep, but a lot of people think it is. What happens there is you create what we call a singular brainwave. A singular brainwave is not good. And typically they have a high degree of alpha, but they don't have enough theta. What happens then is they don't sleep. So I'll see people that say, well, I'm a meditator. I can't believe I can't sleep. Well, I know you can't sleep because you're not working every brainwave. And I'm going to get into that in just a minute, why it's so important. Every brainwave is important. So what we did is we said, well, what can we do? Well, technology is there. Anytime there's been let's say something happening in consciousness, there's always a technological solution. So what she's listening to, she's on our vibration bed. I didn't bring one of those with me. They would be, my luggage didn't come anyway, so that bed wouldn't have made it for sure. But there's transducers in it. If you know Dr. Emoto, anybody ever read his books? He's the Secret Life of Water. He used to come out to our events in Hawaii and speak. But we figured, well, if our body's 70% water, why don't we program the healing energy through the bed? So you feel a vibration through the bed while they're doing it. She's wearing headlights so we can give light into the brain, which I'm going to talk a little bit about the biological effect that happens. We are light beings. When you walked into this tent, the reason I saw you was you shared your photons with me. The reason you saw me is I shared my photons with you. We can't help it. Everybody has this discharge. The reason the saints have bigger discharges and they can paint them is that they're broadcasting more energy. So the more energy you broadcast, the more people can see it. But that's the reason we see you, is because you're throwing off energy. And your body absorbs that energy. That's why you are the sum total of the 5 people you hang around most with. Because you're absorbing their genetic traits as well as their light features. So what we're doing here is we're bringing light into the gut because there's a brain-gut axis. If there's more neuron connections in the gut than there are in the brain. You have 90% of the serotonin that runs your body is formed in the gut. In fact, almost every neurotransmitter is made in the gut, not in the brain. I'm going to get into that in a minute. And then she's wearing the Braintap. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we call brainwave entrainment, because there's a lot of talk out there about electromagnetic energy and things like that. And I protect myself. I have a little thing, and I have one of the little devices like you're wearing. I have the bigger one. It's up in my bag when I'm on the airplanes. Yeah, it's a radionics. It's generating a frequency around me. So, I'm not going to take any chances, So I'm going to keep it around me. But what happens is these frequencies, these things are actually triggering in the brain, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it, cortical responses. Now, you don't hear them, but they're responding. Just like when you get around people you love and appreciate, you start to feel good. Maybe, and you get around people you don't like or you don't want to see, or if you see them out shopping and you don't really want to talk to them and you duck down the other aisle so they walk by, that bad feeling happens because of this vibratory energy that we have. So that's why it's better to, when Buddha said, he who angers you conquers you, medical science has proven that true. Because when you think an angry, negative thought about another person, your brain has to create the chemical-related emotion. When you think the thought, the emotion creates the chemical experience, so you're killing yourself. You're creating the negative in yourself so you can experience it toward that other person, but it's hurting you. That's why everything that happens through you happens to you. And when Jesus said, hey, love your enemy, he said, hey, preserve yourself. And medical science is proving that all right, because those mirror neurons, in order for you to love or hate someone, you have to feel it in yourself. That's why it's just better to be kind of neutral. If you don't like them, just be neutral to them. When we talk about the science of light and sound, and this is up there during the breaks or tomorrow or whenever you can take a ride on the equipment, we have what we call strategic mind messaging. The reason we have that is if you don't change the dialogue of what you're saying to yourself, that's a big factor. That's why when they do meditate, if they do have a guru and they like what they're doing, great. That's perfect. But most people try to do it on their own and they don't know what they're doing. And so they get their own thoughts. What I tell people is your best thoughts brought you here. But we need to upgrade your best thoughts. So think about it like your computer. Even though we don't want to do it, we want to upgrade our computers. We want to keep the latest operating system. We need to keep doing that with our own brains. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about strategic mind messages. We have binaural beats. These are frequencies that we put into the ears. So if we wanted to get a calming frequency, we might put 200 hertz frequency in one ear and a 210 hertz frequency in the other. The brain would hear 10 hertz frequency. It doesn't hear 200. It doesn't hear 210. And the scary thing is that that's the way your brain works all the time. So you never hear what you think you hear. You're always hearing the difference of what you think you heard, because that's the way our brain works. It's always getting the difference. That's why singers, and there's certain pitches in harmony that we like that are in accord with what our brain likes, and some that we don't. And then we use what we call isochronic tones. Each of you have experienced isochronic tones before. You just didn't know it. If you went to a mountain and you liked it and the beauty that was there, that mountain is resonating about 7.8 hertz frequency. That's theta. That's parasympathetic. Your body is healing. That's also where people go if they really want to get in touch spiritually. If you're really in a deep samadhi or whatever, you're probably in deep theta or you're in high gamma. One of the two. We've measured people in both. The monks that they studied in Wisconsin were in gamma, not in any of these states. So when we talk about, then we have light therapy. The reason we have light therapy, just as a little precursor to what we're going to talk about, light goes into the brain, into the body. We put it in the ears. Somebody goes, why do you have light in the ears? Well, for those that are acupuncturists in the room, you know why we do, because there's meridian lines in the ears. In that energy, we're pushing energy in the form of photons. Those photons are going to take the path of least resistance. It's going to light up the body. And if your ears get warm, that's because there's blockages. But as soon as those blockages are cleared, the ears won't get warm anymore. But the way the light works in your body, a photon is absorbed by the red blood cell, the hemoglobin. It circulates through the body. The blood goes through every blood, all the blood in your body goes through both ears every 4 to 5 minutes. So if we want to blood dope your body with light, we want to put it in through the ears. So we put the light in there. We have red and blue light. That's a 633 light and a 470 light, all at a frequency of 97 hertz frequency, which is a no-J frequency that literally instructs the brain to shut down the sympathetic overload and turn on parasympathetics. No healing can happen when you're in sympathetic overload. Zero. Because your body's fighting to survive. Healing happens when you get into parasympathetics. So if you don't get them into parasympathetics, they're not going to heal. I don't care what you do for them. It's not going to work. If you're wondering why some things don't work for your patients, it's because they're in high sympathetics. Now, the way the photon works, it circulates through the body. When it finds a cell that's not operating correctly, that's the mitochondria shut down, it borrows a photon. When it borrows that photon, it starts the engine of that cell, and it remembers who it is. The genetic memory is in that cell. It's just shut down. It needs light. Light is the most underprescribed nutrient on the planet right now. There's a spiritual light and there's a physical corresponding light. We need both of them. And then we're using the auricular therapy, which you're talking. Now, when all of this is happening at one time, the brain goes into something called the relaxation response. So there's the fight or flight and there's the relaxation response. This is a lot of things happening to the brain at one time. But because they're all it's like a symphony. If you heard somebody playing all the different musical instruments in a symphony any way they wanted to, it'd be chaos. But when they play it all together and they get in harmony, then magic happens and you have beautiful music. And if it's 10 hertz music, you get alpha. Your brain corresponds to that. That's why people like that kind of music. So what we're doing is we're training the brain. Now, the nice thing about the brain is because 95% of the time you're unconscious, we're teaching it unconsciously. It takes no conscious effort on your part. You can get the benefits of deep meditation without no conscious thinking. In fact, your conscious mind isn't necessary anyway. That's what usually brings you all the trouble. So we're going to teach the subconscious. Now, this is somebody's brain before we're going to talk more about the heart rate variability, but we can see the energy in the brain, what's going on here. They call it ATP. Think of it as the currency in the body. If you don't have ATP production, you can't heal either, because you can't restore or rejuvenate the body. This person's brain was at 40%, but after providing it with the light therapy, it was at 88%. This was in a 20-minute session. And we'll be able to do this for some of you. We can't do it for all of you over the next few days, but Rita does have a machine here, so you could come back and try pre and post with it. When we're at events, we do this with doctors all the time. So most of you probably know Bruce Lipton, I hope. If you haven't, then I'm going to recommend you read Bruce Lipton's book. Bruce is also one of the doctors that comes out to Hawaii and speaks. He's the one who he talks a lot. 50 years ago, when nobody was talking about genetics and stem cells and all those things, Bruce Lipton is the one who brought it out. And we're talking about there's low energy states or low frequency states and high frequency states. When somebody's in these unresourceful states, which I'll list here, you can't heal in those states. These are reactionary states. There's one thing that's really, when you're in any of those states, can anybody tell me what they all have in common? In those states, you can't breathe. You're holding your breath. And if you're holding your breath, you don't get something really important. It's called pranic energy, right? And that's where your next piece of information comes from. We're on a need-to-know basis from the universe. If we don't breathe, we don't know. So the body freezes up, causes anxiety, fear, all those kind of things. When we do testing with people on the HRV, usually we find people that are in martial arts, yoga teachers, or dancers. They have the best heart rate variability because not only are they breathing, but they're doing things where they have to move. Our nervous system wants to move. So by moving, breathing, magic happens in the body. So you need to have the downtime, but you also have to work on breathing. That's why a lot of in our brain tapping sessions, I'm focusing a lot on breathing. In breathing, you can change your coherency, the way your heart talks to your brain. Tomorrow I'm going to talk more about why that's important. But when these functions happen, the body heals itself. Our body is a self-healing system. We have to just get rid of all the interference. So if we can get rid of the interference, the body heals. This is what I said earlier. 7 generations are affected by what you do today. When somebody asked me, what am I doing? I said, well, my dad, I guess it was 1972, he was sitting in a seminar learning how to relax. And he was a very gifted alcoholic. I mean, everything could be going really well, and he'd just go out and get drunk and spend all the family's money. And he had 9 kids. So, I mean, he had to do really well, in that. But what he found out was he didn't need alcohol to relax once he learned how to de-stress. So when somebody says, when my dad went to that one seminar, there's somebody out there that each of you might be able to touch. And when just with me, and most of my family works in this field now with me, but we've helped literally millions of people around the world because my dad went to that one seminar. So you never know who you're going to touch and how lives are going to change. And on a genetic level, you're changing them, just changing yourself. One of the things I want to tell about the conscious parenting, when we did a research study with autism, we did it with the mothers of autistic children because the mothers are all suffering from PTSD. Think about it. You get up every morning, you don't know what your child's going to do. It's a terrible thing. And I said, I don't want you to put your kids on it unless they ask to use it. Because we did a study before that, and the mothers couldn't get the kids to use the Braintap. So I said, this time we're going to have the parents do it. When the parents, these were 17 mothers, and they're part of a group called Thinking Mothers Revolution. And it's a group of mothers that are decided to take control and help their kids and just find alternative ways to help them with autism. Those 17 mothers all were using the equipment. And I said, you got to use it in a public space in your home so that your child can see you using it. Use the 10-minute session because it only takes 10 minutes to reboot your system. Get your body back on track. Within 3 weeks, all of their children were asking to use the Braintap. Because we learn the same way as monkeys from our parents. So that's the way, when I'm working with a kid, I'm going to work with the parent first. I'm not going to just work with the kid and have the parents drinking soda pop or whatever, and then they go home and tell the kid they can't have it. That doesn't work. And that all happens because when you feel what your kids feel. You might not consciously know it, but you feel that if they're feeling good or bad. It's not just your friends when you think about them, they call you on the telephone. That happens all the time because the quantum entanglement that happens with your family all the time. So we talk about visualizations, affirmations, and mental rehearsals. So what we've done is we've set up in your brain right now, there's something we call the reticular activating system. For those that aren't aware of that, it's a system that is hardwired into our brain. When we walk into any environment, our brain is scanning, looking for things that are similar, things that we know. Is there any danger here? Am I safe to be who I am? What's going on? And then it feeds us back, okay, this is how we should act in this situation. So when we start doing positive visualization, positive messaging, we're setting a greater expectation for ourselves. We're changing the structure of reality because we're changing our structure of how we perceive reality. I'm a little different in what I think. There's already an infinite number of realities. You don't need to create anything. Take the effort off yourself. It's all created for you. You just have to choose the one you want to live in. It's already there for you because there's only an infinite number of possibilities from any one moment in time. So if you live your life that way, then you'll be open to it. If you don't, then those doorways will close down and you won't see those options, those opportunities that are there for you. So what happens, you start doing this, you increase your confidence, your motivation, your self-image, you eliminate limited beliefs, you accelerated learning, and you increase your level of performance. My book, when I wrote the book Awaken the Genius, I wrote that because I was writing a course for PhDs in Arizona. They were going to be teaching in America. You probably have it here now, but if you get caught driving while you're intoxicated, you have to go to an education class. Well, if you get caught driving twice, they know you don't just need the class, you need a little therapy. So my course was more the therapy course. It was a second level because they couldn't say, oh, it was just an accident. They already got busted once. Now they got busted twice. There's a problem there. And what we would tell them is your subconscious is saying, I need help. That's why you got caught. And it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a coincidence. But when I was teaching, this was back in the early 90s, in fact, like 91, 92, the psychologists I was working with, and at the time I was a master's, I only had a master's degree, and they weren't getting what I was telling them. And I said to my wife, I go, we got to awaken their genius. Then I said, wow, that's the name of a book. I'm gonna write that. And so, but what it was is all about accelerated learning. I needed to accelerate the way to learn or teach people how to learn. Now it's in a lot of the schools. How many people here, you ever heard of the Creative School in Bangalore? There's a school called the Creative School. A couple of you had. They use the Braintap in every room. And the kids all get to pick out the session they want to do. They have a 12-station brain tapping center. Usually when I'm in Bangalore, I'll go over and talk to them. I don't have time this time because we're going to Delhi, so I won't do that. But the kids love it because now when they're under stress, because kids have stress too, they have an outlet. They can go do it. And they got it first for their soccer team because we do a lot with sports, and I work with a lot of the Olympians, so they want it for the sports team, but then they found out, hey, it can help with learning. It really helps with learning, and the byproduct is it'll help with sports because you're getting the coordination there. So this is someone's brain. When I talked about earlier, this red over here, 41% delta, that's actually kind of low. But you can see how the other brain waves aren't quite there. This is what most brains look like before they do a brain tapping session. And then after they do it, it'll look like this. This is almost a perfect brain. So when you look at 42% beta, 26% alpha, there's theta and delta there. And I'm going to get into a little bit more about what these brain waves do in a moment. But these are all playing a part. The brain on the left, the before brain, is a tired brain. In fact, if we went a little bit further, if they were an older person, we would probably find their left brain was moving just a little bit slower than the right brain because that happens over time. So we have sessions that actually speed up the left brain, and we have some incredible results with neuroplasticity and cognitive function in the aging population. So this is a friend of mine, Dr. Kelly Miller. He's a brain tapper, but he just wrote this book. And together, he has a chapter in there about the brain tap, but I told him I would give him credit because I'm stealing some of his research when I talk to you here, because it's very good what he figured out. But when you think about the frontal lobe, this part of the brain, that's the part of your brain that controls beta waves. Beta waves produce dopamine. So if somebody when you saw that one picture where they had so much delta, very little beta, they don't have any dopamine. They're going to be depressed. There's no rewards there. They don't have enough in their system, and they can't trigger it. This is something, so if they have brain damage, let's say that something happened and their frontal lobe is damaged, because we do a lot with that. Now, light in the brain does a lot of wonderful things, but the main thing that beta does, we call that our reactionary mind. If you can't react, you become dull, lifeless. You don't want to move. You're not very motivated and things of that nature. When we talk about alpha, alpha is the parietal lobes, and it creates acetylcholine. Acetylcholine also triggers mirror neurons. So if you don't have enough acetylcholine and you have enough alpha, you can't learn very well, especially when it has to do with learning something when somebody else is teaching you. Because like yoga or meditation, those kind of things, because your brain's trying to mirror it, but you don't have the chemicals to do it in your brain. So this is part of it. This is what autistic kids are missing. When we do brain scans on autistic kids, typically they have less than 5% of the alpha brain waves happening. You should have 35% of your brain waves in alpha. And what we found was that's why they hit somebody and they don't know they've hurt them. It's also, if you've ever seen an autistic child when they're stimming, what they're trying to do is throw off that extra energy, because alpha is also a mitigating energy source. So it runs the energy through the body, runs it through the body, instead of, if it's just all there at beta, there's no place for that energy to go. That's why a lot of people have to go out and they drink too much or they do different drugs, because they want to break that state. They want to get out. They don't want to get buzzed like people think. They want to get normal, and so they're trying to get back to normal. With this, and also when the disassociated kids, when they're in deep theta and they don't know what's happening out here, it's because they've just tuned out. They can't get back to beta. We need to be able to regulate through these different brain waves. So it's not one brain wave is king. They're all important. When you think about theta, this is where your parasympathetic is turned on and you're healing, but it's also GABA. There's a lot of drugs out there on the market now talking about the GABA pathways and things like that. What they're trying to do is what your brain does anyway. And I don't know, I know we have a lot of medical doctors in the room, but there's a book out called Suggestible You. It's called Suggestible You. And they did a study now. The placebo effect is now up to 40%. Almost every drug on the market for depression would not pass if it was put on the market today, because now 40% of people will respond to the placebo. So when you think about that, part of it is because basically when people start to buy into it or believe in certain things. So now they know there's a gene actually that they can methylate. If that gene is methylating, they know you're more susceptible to being somebody who is a placebo or somebody who's a responder of placebo. They can actually screen them out now. The bad thing is they're going to have more drugs going to the market, but they're still going to have the placebo effect. But they're going to be there. So, and part of that is because of the effect of GABA in the system. When you turn on this pathway, all things are possible. This is where every creative genius has ever went. Theta is that place where you have divine inspiration too. The same with high gamma too. Gamma kind of works the opposite. It's the higher level of when you think about what this one does. And theta is that state just before you go to sleep. There's also something called hypermnesia, super memory, that happens when you're in theta. When you hear something like in that state, it's there. Like if you heard a song waking up in the morning, and that song just sticks in your head all day, even if you didn't like it, and then finally you go to sleep, you wake up the next day, it's gone, you go, I'm glad that song's gone, because you heard it there. But imagine if you were to hear messages there that you wanted to hear to influence you in a positive way. That's kind of what brain tapping does, because we do a lot of theta training in Braintap. Now the delta creates serotonin. Now the problem most people have is this delta, they're in high delta, but they still don't have serotonin. That's because they're in fight or flight and they're in delta. Their body is mixed up. When you're in delta, you should be in parasympathetics. You shouldn't be in high stress. But what's happening is their body's in high stress, but their mind's in this deep delta state. So now their gut isn't making the serotonin they need. So they have to take an SSRI that holds the serotonin in their brain to try to make them feel good. So that's why that gut-brain axis is so important, and working with that and getting the breathing and the meditation right. Now, in 2016, in Scientific America, they came out with a study that they showed that the brain, that most of you probably know that sleeping is really important, right? You know that. So I want you to look to your right now. Look at the person to your right. Look at the person to your left. Because if it's not you, it's one of them. Because 1 out of 3 people is having problems sleeping at night, right? And the problem is if you're not sleeping, you're not detoxing. So what they showed, what medical science now shows, is that there's an internal plumbing system that rids the body of toxins. Most of you might know it. It's called the lymphatic system. But for some reason, they just discovered it in 2016 in the brain. Now, what happens is some of you might have experienced this. You ever had sleep paralysis? Anybody here ever experienced that, where you wake up and you can't move your body because you're locked in place? You woke up in the middle of a cleaning cycle for your brain. It should happen 4 to 5 times every night. But you're usually sleeping. You're in deep delta. They have what's called delta burst at that time. That's where you get all your energy. If you can do deep sleep for more than an hour, your brain then will be recharged. It doesn't matter if you sleep 4 hours, you'll have as much energy as you used to get for 10 hours, because it's not about the hours you sleep, it's about the depth of your sleep, the level that you're in. So what happens here is, I said, if you don't reach this level 4 sleep, that cleaning ritual never kicks in. So that's a key here, is to get that cleaning cycle to kick in. And I'm almost done here, so I'm not sure where we at. I'm over. Just a few more slides. So this is the heart rate variability we're going to go over tomorrow, but the pre and post, I'm going to share that with you tomorrow. We'll end it I'm just going to show you one more thing. When we talk about every culture in the world, every tradition before ours has used energy. That if they didn't use energy, there wasn't a healing system. Everything that most people do out there, even pharmacology, is really using energy, moving energy. It's just sometimes they don't get the right response that they want. So when you think about our bodies and what's going on, the whole thing is about getting movement in the body. Our body is designed to change states. When we're talking about here in brainwave states, we're talking about neuroplasticity. It's not being stuck in beta and being able to be like a Vulcan on Star Trek or something where you can think things through logically or something like that. Although in our school systems, we really honor the people that are highly left-brained, but it's the right brain and left brain solution. It's being whole brain that's really important. And in order to do that, you need to stimulate all these different systems. We talk about light, sound, and vibration. So I'm going to encourage you while I'm here. You can talk to me, pull me aside, whatever. I'll be here for the whole weekend. And if you get a chance, either at the breaks or afterwards, we're going to be out there with our couple chairs out there. And tomorrow we'll be able to do some scans with you. So thanks for allowing me this time.